Yo, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're bringing you another video about cannabis and whether or not it can be beneficial or detrimental to your yoga practice in the long term. Now, with cannabis becoming legalized and decriminalized in many places around the world, we're seeing it more and more commonly used to aid people in their activities that they like to do, especially with yoga practice. You can actually find many studios in California, Colorado, and plenty of other places in the world that are open just for this purpose, right? These studios are cannabis yoga studios, right? The whole point is to get high and enjoy yoga together. People get together, consume cannabis in a communal way, right? Start to set that vibe, get that good energy going, all heighten their experience, and then they have their practice together. Now, on the surface, this seems like it could be an amazing experience and probably a good way to have a deeper and more mindful practice, right? But I wanted to know, what does this look like as you practice daily in this form, right? So yes, I believe that smoking weed can help you to achieve a more mindful practice, perhaps more of a flow state in your practice, but in the long term, is it beneficial to smoke before you practice yoga day after day after day? Now, when weed became legal here in Thailand, one of my first thoughts was that I could use this angle to finally open up my own yoga studio and find a specific niche here in Chiang Mai. Now, Chiang Mai is a great city for people who want to come to practice yoga, right? Many people come here on sort of a spiritual holiday, right? They go off and do meditation retreats, vipassanas, yoga practice, all sorts of things are available here. And now it's also, of course, a very big weed destination, since it's legal and can literally be found on every street that you walk down in nearly any city in Thailand. So I thought maybe this would be a great way to finally find a niche and be able to open a yoga studio with a specific audience, right? Rather than competing with all the other studios that have been around, my angle would specifically be for cannabis yoga. Now, I thought this might be a good idea, and I had used cannabis with yoga in the past, here and there, and I always did feel that using cannabis with my yoga practice really helped to aid my practice, right? It definitely boosted my mindfulness, put me in a flow state, made me really focused on each asana, what my body was doing, how my breath was coming in and out. After my practice, my meditation would feel so deep. I remember having incredibly profound experiences when using cannabis with yoga in the past. However, if I wanted to decide to actually open a studio based around this concept of using cannabis with yoga, I needed to have a clearer picture on what this would feel like day in and day out. So I decided I would do 2 weeks of practicing with cannabis every single day. Now, during this time, what I felt when I would smoke weed and practice, I would get very, very deep into my practice, right? Very mindful. Again, cannabis has been shown with certain people to increase their ability to focus on activities, perhaps even reach some kind of flow state. And for someone who's been practicing yoga for many years, I find that cannabis definitely helps me to get into my practice. I really feel each asana. I follow each breath. Afterwards, when I'm doing my pranayama and my meditation, I feel like I reach incredibly deep places that I usually am not able to reach so easily with my average day-to-day practice. Thinking back years ago, I remember certain times where I had consumed cannabis, smoked some weed, and then practiced yoga. And I remember having some of the deepest experiences I have ever had in my yoga practice and in my meditation when it was aided by cannabis. So far sounds like it's an amazing thing, and it could be incredibly beneficial, right? And sort of boost your practice or level it up. Sounds pretty great, right? In the short term, yes. However, as you continuously use cannabis with your yoga practice, at least for me, I seem to become dependent on the cannabis to even do my practice. After the 2 weeks were up, I did notice that it wasn't having as great of an effect towards the end as it was in the beginning of these 2 weeks. I also noticed that after this time was up, I had a hard time practicing without cannabis. Bringing myself to the mat and just being able to do my practice sober-minded all by myself in the morning without cannabis aiding my practice just didn't seem as deep, it didn't seem as profound, it didn't seem like something I wanted to do after having used cannabis with my practice for these 2 weeks. So that is, in the long run, definitely not a good thing. And I actually remember when I studied yoga in India, in Rishikesh, back in 2019, I remember asking this question to one of the teachers, like, what do you think about using cannabis with practice, or potentially using psychedelics and things like this to sort of achieve this level of samadhi, right? Rather than spending years and years or lifetimes of practice to try to achieve it. And the teacher told me, yes, you can use these things, right? It's a way of sort of cheating the process and skipping ahead to this higher level. However, if your mind is not ready for these higher levels, then this is where you could run into problems. The point of a daily practice is that every single day for years and years, you're bringing yourself to the mat. You're showing up, whether it's a good day or a bad day. You're putting yourself through your practice. You're spending time breathing. You're spending time moving. You're spending time sitting still, observing your thoughts, right? Training your mind, restraining your senses. Now, if you do this with the aid of other drugs and substances, then you're sort of cheating the process, and ultimately you're not going to be prepared for that deep state. Another thing that I noticed when I would start my day very early with cannabis and yoga practice, it made me feel like it was okay to smoke that early on because I was using it for a purpose, right? I was using cannabis to aid my yoga practice, and I would always think if I'm starting my day with a strong yoga practice, then that's an amazing way to start the day. Generally, it's setting me up for a calmer state of mind throughout the day, perhaps more mindfulness, better breathing, my body feels better. And when you have a good practice, there are many ways that it sets you up for a successful day. However, when I was starting my day with cannabis and then my yoga practice, although I would have a really good practice usually, then, I'm done practicing 9 o'clock, I have the whole rest of the day to go, and I've already sort of induced these good feelings or this release of dopamine via smoking cannabis very early on in the day. So then I would find that the rest of the day, it would be a bit of a struggle to have these motivation or the higher energy levels without continuing to use cannabis. So it was sort of a slippery slope where I would start my day using cannabis to aid my practice, but then ultimately this would lead to a midday toke, an afternoon toke, an evening toke. It would lead to me having to sort of dose myself throughout the day to keep up this level of just happiness or a pleasurable affect that I had in my mind. So basically when I would start my day with cannabis, even though it was for my yoga practice, I would then need to continuously use cannabis throughout the day. And in the long run, starting my practice with cannabis led to me not being able to practice without cannabis and feeling that my connection with my body and my mind and my breath and my yoga practice just wasn't deep if I wasn't using cannabis. This idea also made sense when I saw another one of Andrew Huberman's podcasts where he talked about this idea of dopamine stacking. So generally, if you're practicing yoga early in the morning, this is going to give you some release of dopamine. Honestly, whether it's yoga practice or running or working out or any type of physical activity. Now, if you're first getting dopamine from cannabis or smoking weed, and then you were trying to get some more dopamine from your yoga practice and from your breath work and from your meditation, you are stacking these dopamines from both internal sources and external sources, and ultimately that could be a negative thing. You can take a look at this clip to see what Mr. Huberman has to say.
You asked about, should I be taking caffeine in addition to training and blasting music? I always say people differ on this spectrum, but be careful about stacking dopamine. Training itself is a stimulus for dopamine release. Cold water is a stimulus for dopamine release. But if you start doing training, cold water, listening to your favorite music, plus you're taking, let's say, some stimulant. So it all makes perfect sense when because nature is beautiful and the biology is laid out for us. But if we start stacking behaviors plus pharmacology plus mindsets that increase dopamine, great. But what that means is that if you get a really big dopamine increase, well, then that afternoon you might not feel the drive to do the work. You might think, oh, why am I sleeping in the afternoon? Why am I kind of less motivated? Or next day for training without that pharmacology, you're thinking, oh yeah, that the workout I don't get quite as intense a contraction.
So what are my major takeaways? I think every once in a long while, if you want to use some cannabis with your practice to sort of give you a boost, get you super mindful and in your flow state and have a really good experience, every once in a while it can be really amazing if cannabis has good effects on you. And again, it can affect everybody differently. However, in the long run, using it consistently day after day is not going to benefit your practice. Ultimately, it will hold you back from progressing with your own personal practice. And again, this is of course for people who want to maintain a daily practice and progress with yoga. So if you just do yoga occasionally once in a while, maybe not such a big deal for you. But if you're a regular practitioner and you go to your mat every morning, every day, I believe that using cannabis with your practice regularly is not going to benefit you, and ultimately it will hold you back from progressing with your practice. Thank you all so much for listening to me today. I hope you got some value out of this video. Please comment if you have any personal experiences with using cannabis and yoga and what you believe the effects are, whether it's good, whether it's bad, long-term, short-term, anything like that. I would love to hear it and have some discussions with you. Thank you all so much. See you next time.